What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, Kevin Valentin.
And I'm the other host of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro. Kev, it's good to be back, dude. I know we've been gone for the last couple of weeks, but finally got back to studio, finally got back to recording, and let's get to it, dude.
Yes, sir. Always good to be back in the booth. Guys, it is Sunday night here. We are currently watching, or should I say, skimming the Dolphins-Rams game, so you guys will
It's Monday
know.
night.
Oh, damn it. It is Monday night. You see, I'm all messed up. The Colts got me messed up. I'm still recovering from the Yankees. It's just, I've lost all sense of time for the last couple of weeks. So excuse me while I rumble and muster through this. So it's Monday night, and we are skimming through the Dolphins and Rams game. So by the time we finish, this game will have already obviously gone final. But in today's agenda, we have a couple of jam-packed segments to talk through. So we are first going to discuss that absolute annihilation from the Philadelphia Eagles in Jerry World. Man, when I tell you that was one pathetic excuse for a football game by the Dallas Cowboys, that was absolutely embarrassing. And Micah Parsons' comments afterwards were just disgraceful. So we'll get into that a little bit. We will move on to the 7-2 Steelers going up against rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels. What a game that ended up closing out to be. Albeit the Commanders ended up losing due to lack of attention to detail, lack of discipline, whatever you want to go for. It came down to a hard count. Russell Wilson gets a rookie to jump off sides, and they were able to close out the game in favor of the Steelers. Now, when it comes to the Commanders, obviously everybody continues to say Jaden Daniels is having an incredible year. He's a rookie. He's playing out of his mind. But I did see a statistic that I didn't realize. I didn't put two and two together. The reason they're 7-3, or should I say one of the reasons, the 7 wins that they have are teams under 500. Their 3 losses are teams above 500. So is Washington for real, or are they just beating up on bad teams? The next segment is going to be the one that I texted Kyle. Kyle, what do you think? 15 minutes, not even into the Colts game. I was like, oh, I'm going to tear them apart. Like it wasn't even like 9 minutes in the first quarter.
Oh, I think it was like within like the first 5 minutes of the first quarter. I mean, it was especially after what happened on that first drive.
Yeah, so like I'm ready to destroy them. I've seen enough. I've heard enough from Pat McAfee and Darius Butler, obviously 2 former Colts and a bunch of other Colts beat writers and reporters. I've had enough. I'm going to speak my piece. This organization is, as Kyle would say, a walking dumpster fire.
And just to let you guys know, just prepare yourselves for what's coming.
Yeah, it's
I've set time aside for the tirade that's coming because Kev does not hold back on his Colts when they shit the bed.
In my defense, I don't hold back on any of my teams, but I digress. And then we're going to move into the Thursday night game that we were not able to cover, the Bengals and Ravens game. Some would say that was the game of the year thus far. Some would say it was, one of the best games they've seen in a long time, but ending in a 35-34 win for the Ravens. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow absolutely annihilating record books, and that high prolific offense just finding a way to, once again, fall short. So that is definitely a topic at hand. And then Kyle and I are going to pick our winners and losers for the week, either a team or a player that we feel had a great or a bad game. And we're just going to kind of discuss, now that we are just about over the halfway point, who we feel has been performing very well and that had a pretty brilliant or bad game this week. So, guys, we got a jam-packed agenda for you here. Obviously, we haven't recorded in a while. We've been busy between work and whatnot, so we're just trying to get back into the groove of things, and we are just excited to be back in the booth.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, without further ado, Kev, let's just dive straight into the first game that you mentioned. Obviously, the Eagles and Cowboys game from this past weekend. Really kind of looking at this game in totality, looking back at it from just a couple days, this was an absolute snooze fest of a game. I mean, if you were an Eagles fan, this is one of those games where it was probably a pure delight to be able to watch that game because it worked out really well in your favor. But on the other side of the spectrum, if you're a Cowboys fan, the seasonal depression continues. I mean, just to kind of lead it into the game itself, like Kev mentioned, this game was just an absolute runaway for the Eagles here. They won by the score of 34-6. I mean, I would say that the first half of this game was relatively competitive. It was kind of a back and forth affair early on, but in the second half, just the Eagles, I mean, they came out of the gate strong in the third quarter, and they never looked back, whether it was on the offensive side of the ball, from Jalen Hurts' perspective, or running the football as well on the offensive side of the ball, forcing turnovers against Dallas, and that what I would say is anemic offense at this point, just because Dak's not in there. There's some players hurt on that side of the ball as well. The Eagles were able to capitalize on those turnovers and turn them into points. And pretty much, I want to say like halfway through the third quarter, or really kind of going towards the end of the third quarter, the game was absolutely out of reach for the Cowboys. And it really kind of goes to show how well the Eagles have responded over the last couple of weeks. I would actually say over the last month or so, because they're currently on a 5-game win streak, currently sitting at a 7-2 record. And because the Commanders lost this past weekend, the Eagles are now in first place in the NFC East, just based off of the fact they have one less loss compared to the Commanders. So their winning percentage is a little bit better than Washington at this point. Now, Kev, I know when it comes to the Eagles, they're kind of like the second favorite team that you follow outside of the Colts. I would say the Colts are not really doing you any favors at this point, but we'll talk about that later. But Kev, just kind of looking back at this Eagles versus Cowboys matchup, what are the takeaways from the Eagles just decisively winning over the Cowboys? And when it comes to the Cowboys, dude, where do they go from here?
Well, I mean, I want to start with, obviously, this game was immensely close to start off in the. I mean, it was 7-3 at the end of it. And Dallas looked like they were going to be competitive in this game, despite having Dak Prescott out for the year, because they were able to get to Jalen Hurts a few times early on, if not sack him, but get him rattled, move him outside of the pocket, make him have a little bit of a complicated first couple plays. And, they weren't really able to run the ball effectively to start. So I thought Dallas was going to find a way to do what they usually do in these NFC matchups, and that's be competitive despite whoever's in the game. And it turned out it was the complete opposite. Once the Eagles were able to kind of like, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Kind of get the ship under control or right the ship. There you go. That's what I'm thinking of. They were able to walk away with it. It didn't take a whole lot. They didn't kill them for a crazy amount of yards or a crazy amount of points. Obviously, they scored 34, but a lot of them ended up being field goals later on. Quite literally, Jalen Hurts only had 202 yards in the air. Saquon only had 66 yards on the ground. So it's like, it wasn't one of those like Jalen goes for 300, Saquon went for another $150 or 200 all-purpose yards. Like, it was just like everybody was able to chip away and capitalize on Dallas's inability to move the ball downfield. And on the Dallas side of things, outside of their defense playing not lights out, but competitive in that first half, they were really unable to keep up with the incompetence of the offense. Obviously, when an offense is stale or stagnant or just inconsistent, you have to obviously keep your defense on the field. And to an extent, you play to your strengths. Dallas's defense has never been a strength at no point, but they found a way to stay in this game early on. And even at halftime, it was only 14-6. So they were finding ways to make their lives, a living hell in Philadelphia, because it should have been a blowout. It should have definitely been way further along than what this score finally said. But when you have Cooper Rush with a total of 45 passing yards, not for the half, not for the quarter, for the game. They didn't put Trey Lance in until, if I'm not mistaken, the very end of the third quarter, if not in the fourth quarter, to which it was obviously way too late and it was already a runaway. I'm not understanding how one organization can be so dysfunctional, mismanaged, and obviously poorly owned. But then I remember they're owned by Jerry Jones. There's a reason why this team hasn't won a Super Bowl in over 30 years. There's a reason why nobody takes them serious come playoffs. There's a reason why Stephen A. Smith quite literally gets pleasure and joy from watching them suffer as much as they do. The fan base being as obnoxious as they are year in and year out. This is our year. This is our year to be embarrassed is more like it, because it's like it never fails. You don't sign anybody in free agency. You give Dak $60 million. You wait till the end to give CD his contract. You don't trade for anybody outside of a wide receiver, and you end up exchanging a fourth-round pick for it, and it's not even somebody that you move the needle. DeAndre Hopkins was traded for less, and you went and traded for a no-name and gave up more capital. I've said it 1,000 times. Kyle and I have talked about this personally for years. Jerry's a great businessman. He knows how to capitalize on creating revenue, profit margins, all the things that you can think of from an ownership standpoint and making money. Jerry Jones knows how to do it. Marketing the team, making open tours during practice, all the things that he does for the city of Dallas in terms of what he does for the Cowboys. The man's a billionaire for a reason. But as an owner, from a strategic, a leadership, as well as a football mind, he cannot do it. I've never seen somebody fail repeatedly and say, "Damn, you know what? Maybe I should stop. Maybe I should pass this on to the kids. Maybe I should go and hire an outside party." No, they keep losing, and Jerry keeps saying the same thing. We're a piece away. We like what we have here. You know, like we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna right this ship. No, you have Cooper Rush. You traded for Trey Lance with a fourth round pick. You don't play him to the fourth quarter. You know what you're going to get from Cooper. Quite literally, once Cooper had less than 45 yards at the half, I would have 100% pulled him and said, all right, we got to put Trey in. We got to see what we have. Dak's out for the season. The season's a wash. You are going to have a top 10 pick. There's no reason why Trey Lance doesn't come out at halftime to see what you can do, to see what you can build off of. You traded capital for somebody that was a top 3 pick just a few years ago, and you continue to play a guy that you know is not going to move the needle, and you have a bad defense. What was the point in trading for him in the first place? You didn't sign anybody to amplify the backfield. Ezekiel Elliott, you bring back, despite him being absolutely washed outside of maybe a goal line stand or two. He rushes for 22 yards. I personally don't understand. When you have a total of 49 passing yards as a team in the game, you're embarrassing yourselves. Like, you played yourself, quite literally, because they were sacked for a total of 17 yards. So the combined yardage of Trey Lance and Cooper Rush of 21 and 45 yards is obviously 66 in total. You subtract the 17, the team had a total of 49. So that's what I'm talking about. But anyway, it not a good look. Dallas quite literally needs to either just accept that they're going to be mediocre until Jerry Jones is gone, or this is just going to continue to be the circus in Dallas and Arlington, Texas, of we're the Dallas Cowboys. We have all the money in the world. This is Jerry world. Everyone knows what it's like to put the star on the side of their helmet and play for this team, and then you lose. Mike McCarthy, he's got to go. He should have went last season. He's not the answer. Albeit, again, I know I made the comment about Micah Parsons. Him saying what he said about Mike McCarthy was completely unacceptable. You don't go throwing your head coach under the bus. It shows a lack of respect, and it definitely shows a lack of leadership on McCarthy's head or McCarthy's side to show that his players are willing and able to throw him under the bus with no repercussions. So he doesn't run this team, and we all know anybody that coaches in Dallas doesn't run the team. It's Jerry Jones, and that's why Jimmy Johnson got fired, because he didn't want to listen to Jerry. But it is what it is. In terms of a game, definitely a snooze fest. But again, it was nothing crazy. It wasn't like AJ or anybody was popping off or anything like that. So the Eagles handled business. They got a divisional win, and Dallas just continues to play like crap at home. 0-4 at home. They've barely scored, and everyone's blown them out by at least 3 or 4 touchdowns a game. So not an ideal situation for Jerry World, but then again, not my problem.
You know, it's kind of funny because one of the interesting things that happened during that game, it happened. I want to say it was kind of like towards the end of the first half. So the Cowboys are marching, and there's a possibility that they're actually going to get a touchdown against the Eagles. And on third down, Cooper throws the ball to CeeDee Lamb, and he can't see it. He can't see it because the sun,
Yeah.
with
The
the
light.
window on that side of the field, at that point in the day, the sun is literally going right through the window. And CD, like as soon as the play was over, like he immediately points to his head. He's like, I couldn't see it. He had, I think he had a visor over his eyes, and he just like taps the glass on his visor, and he's like, I couldn't see it because the sun's like right in my eyes. I can't see anything. And you know, when it comes to that, that is a microcosm of the Cowboys. They can't even build a stadium right. Meaning, you don't put curtains on the windows to be able to, make sure that the players, you know, can't see the ball. Like, what are we talking about here? I mean, all they had to do was literally when they were constructing the what's it called, AT&T Stadium, was literally shift it. So then that way that if you're gonna have two windows on each side of the stadium, that the sun is not gonna come like directly through the window where it actually affects the play on the field. And it's really just kind of a nutshell of the Cowboys in totality. Just they can't even build a stadium right, let alone what you see on the field. And Kev, like you said, when it comes to what happened on the field yesterday, it was an utter nightmare if you were a Cowboys fan. But it's really just kind of more of the same. the Cowboys have been like this pretty much the entire year, whether Dak was in there or not. The Cowboys have been mediocre, and that's putting it mildly, just because they can't really protect the quarterback, because this is not the offensive line from a couple years ago where they were opening up run lanes left and right and they were giving Dak a bunch of time to work with. This defense is not the same. Dan Quinn, he's moved on to greener pastures at this point over in Washington, being the head coach for them. And when it comes to the new defensive coordinator that they have in Mike Zimmer, it's not working. I understand that this team has had injuries. I understand that from a chemistry perspective, this team is just not, they're not in sync like they used to be compared to a couple years ago. And it obviously shows. And there's actually a very good chance that if it continues on this path, that the Cowboys may actually finish in last place. And that's really saying something, because the Giants just went over to Munich this past weekend and lost to Carolina. So it's pretty much going to be, it's going to be a neck and neck race to kind of see who's going to get that last spot in the NFC East, because neither the Cowboys or the Giants at this point are playing particularly well. And there's a very good chance that they could end up with essentially the same record and actually tied for last place in that division. But I mean, when it comes to the Cowboys, like you said, Kev, the season's a wrap. There's no coming back from this. Just, if you're a Cowboys fan, I think you've already accepted it at this point, and it's just going to be a weekly seasonal depression episode, because more than likely, whoever they go up against next, I think they're going up against the Texans on Sunday night next week. I think that's how they have it currently. They may actually flex that game at a Sunday night to show a more compelling matchup on Sunday night next week. But more than likely, I would expect that the Texans would go in there into Dallas and handle business. And I also think that Nico Collins will be back for the Texans as well, which will help out the Houston offense a little bit. But yeah, the Cowboys are a train wreck. But, when it comes to the Eagles, Kev, I'm with you 100%. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. Go on the road. You beat a really inferior team at this point, obviously, despite the fact that you don't have Dak in there. That doesn't help. But yeah, they just overwhelmed them. I mean, looking back at this game, Kev, the Eagles forced 5 turnovers in this game. And despite the fact that this game was relatively close going into halftime, it was just the Eagles were able to make plays on the defensive side of the ball and then score off of those turnovers. Because I want to say that Ezekiel Elliott, he fumbled the ball on like the 1 or 2 yard line when it looked like the Cowboys were actually going to get a pretty nice score to keep them competitive in that game, but they fumble it. The Eagles recover it in the end zone. And then I believe on that same drive, it was either that drive or the drive after, that the Eagles were able to get a touchdown right before the end of the first half. And whatever sort of momentum that the Cowboys had going into halftime got completely stunted by that. And it was just kind of more of the same. That was really kind of the foreshadow of what was to come in the second half, just with how many turnovers the Eagles were forcing. 5 turnovers. If you're looking at that from an Eagles defense perspective, job well done. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. And when it comes to the Eagles, they've won 5 straight games, like I've said. They're in first place in the division. Things are looking good in Philly right now. I know a couple of weeks ago things were a little bit shaky with the tension that was brewing between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, and maybe Nick Sirianni and an extension of the entire team as well. But it seems like the waters have calmed in that regard. And one of the things that cures an ailing team or tension in a team is winning. And the Eagles have won 5 straight, and they really look like they're one of the best teams in the NFC at this point. So we'll see how both teams continue their season, now that we're into the second half of the season. But if I had to say, the Eagles look like they're marching for a pretty good spot in the NFC playoff picture. I don't know if they're going to get the number 1 seed, because the Lions are still a little bit ahead, but the Eagles can definitely make it competitive going towards the later stages of November, going into December. And when it comes to the Cowboys, I think at this point, like you said, Kev, they're going to have a top 10 pick in the draft next year. I think they could actually compete for a top 5 pick at this point. And there's a very good chance that from a front office perspective, the best thing moving forward might just be tank the season, improve your draft position for next year, and see if you could try to bolster this team through the draft. Because when it comes to how this roster was constructed, it's been a complete failure. Injuries have been a part of the Cowboys' lack of success this year. I understand that, but it's the next man up. You got to step up to the plate, and you got to be able to make plays. And unfortunately for them, they have not had that happen in their favor, and it's going to be just a train wreck of a season. But it was a great win by the Eagles. They did exactly what they were supposed to do and beat up an inferior team. You win by 28 points. Goes to show that.
it's like I laugh because we're so critical of them, right? And it's like if it wasn't for the fact that not only their fans but the media has to put them in such a spotlight every year. What's in the what's in the stars for the Cowboys this year? Can they get over the hump? Will they win the Super Bowl this year? Can they get a playoff win? It's like the expectations. I don't think I've ever seen such consistency and failure from a sports franchise in my whole life. I mean, obviously, coming from New York City, the Yankees are always expected to do something because they're the Yankees, but we either get there or we don't. It's not a micromanagement of, oh my goodness, they're going to make it and they're going to win the World Series. It's like, all right, no, they're going to make it to the wild card. They're going to lose in the first round. This year, we had an easier path to the World Series. We made it. Were we expected to win? No, but we did it to ourselves and we lost. The Cowboys are
But you still
like,
made it. At least
that's what
you
I'm
made
saying.
it there. You made it there.
We make it or we don't. Period. The Cowboys
Yeah.
just never make it. But every year it's the same thing. It's like
It's the
literally
expectation.
it's a broken machine that they refuse to replace and they just keep putting bandages over it instead of a whole new unit.
Mhm.
I don't understand how an organization can be so dysfunctional for literally 3 decades of the same formula and Jerry doesn't see a problem. We're not sitting here and looking at the Cleveland Browns every year and saying, competitive as of late, yes. But it's like those 30, 40, 50 years of incompetence don't get erased, but then brought up at the every year. No, Dallas hasn't won the Super Bowl since the 90s, but we feel the need to bring that up in every conversation. No. For the last 30 years, they've been ass. That's what we need to be talking about.
Well, and this is the thing this is actually kind of an interesting question. When it comes to the amount of coverage that the Cowboys get on a yearly basis, is it just solely based off of the fact that they are regarded as America's team based off of what they did in the 90s? And because of that long-lasting impact from the 90s, like the amount of media coverage and the amount of attention that they receive, is it just from that? Or is it just because that there's such a fan base that follows the Cowboys writ large? And because of that, the media has to respond by covering them week in and week out. Because, Kev, if we were to look at the Cowboys, like let's say, for example, I'm just throwing like a random team out here. You have a team like the Denver Broncos. They have the same exact record. Are they getting the same amount of media attention as the Dallas Cowboys with the same record?
No, but the Broncos have 5 wins this year.
No. I'm just saying, like hypothetically, just
yeah.
Just take away the Broncos record from this year. I'm just saying, if the Broncos had the same record as the Cowboys, would the Broncos be getting the same amount of coverage as the Cowboys currently get?
No, not even. Excuse me, not even close. And it's definitely the America's team thing for sure. But it's like I feel like, and this is my personal opinion, I could be 100% off base.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the media feeds off of this because they know they're going to fail, so they have to talk about it.
They get clicks.
It's clickbait. Oh, Dallas Cowboys win a game. They're going to turn it back, and they're going to find a way to win the Super Bowl. Like, they'll make some crazy headline, crazy clickable title, and everyone that hates them is going to click on it because they're going to be like, oh, my God, they suck. And every Cowboys fan is going to be like, oh, man, they're so right. Like, it's not even a drastic up or down. It's whatever's posted about Dallas, everyone's going to read about it for whatever reason.
You know, this is another thing that we kind of have to, I don't know if it's something that we really necessarily pay attention to when it comes to the coverage of the Cowboys, because we always cover the team. Usually, like, if they win or lose on the field, or what Jerry Jones says, or like what the front office says, or like Mike McCarthy says, like we always cover that. But let me ask you this. When it comes to your typical Cowboys fan, so like a Cowboys fan that actually follows the team consistently, but is not like an outright fanatical Cowboys fan that's expecting, oh, we're going straight to the Super Bowl every single year.
I have a couple of realistic Cowboy friends. Yeah.
What's the percentage of like realistic Cowboys fans that know what's coming this season compared to like quote unquote the fanatical fans? Because to me,
prior to Dak's injury or like right now as it stands,
just typically,
I would say probably less than 30%. Because everybody's on that bandwagon of, oh, we're America's team. We're definitely going to do this. Like it's very hard to find a realistic Dallas Cowboys fan. And I know a handful, and I know a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's a handful that's realistic that I can sit down with, break down a game because they're football heads like we are, and they can actually go out and tell and point out flaws without oh, but this happened. Oh, but this person didn't play.
They
Oh,
always
but
come
this
up with
person had
excuses.
a right. You can sit down and actually have an open conversation with a beer and be like, like, what do you think happened here? Oh, like, like that was a terrible play call by McCarthy, but obviously CD didn't catch it. Or, like Dak didn't see that person. Typical Dak Prescott. He sucks. Like, they're not obnoxious like, oh, well, they haven't had timing. They missed practice. This, like the nonsense that all these sports fans come up with. But again, to answer your question, it's a very small percentage that are realistic Cowboys fans.
And I think my thing is like, I wonder if this is like a very vocal minority when it comes to a part of the fan base that is so delusional about what they expect for the Cowboys. I'm talking about essentially the Cowboys fans that are talking about, oh, we're going to the NFC Championship game, we're going to the Super Bowl. I'm talking about that level of expectation. Now, like to me, like if you're hoping that it goes to that, I don't have any issue with that. But if you're basically just going in and saying, oh, we're going to make it to the Super Bowl, oh, we're going to make it to the NFC Championship, I think that's a very small minority, but it's a vocal minority.
Correct.
I think when it comes to the overwhelming majority of fans, I think they know that this shit's a wrap. I think they know that there's no coming back. I mean, once Dak went out, it was pretty much a wrap. But even before Dak got hurt, dude, this team was struggling. The writing's been on the wall the entire year that the Cowboys have not been a functional team this year.
Since that week one failure, bro.
Yeah,
I mean, they won, but
even over the last couple of years, during the regular season, I don't think anybody was really knocking them because they were actually playing relatively well. And I'm not even hating. Like, I know it's we as not just podcasters, but just people in general. Like, we watch the NFL every single Sunday. We know what's going to come with the territory with the Cowboys, especially when they lose, because I take great pleasure sometimes in the failures that the Cowboys bring week in and week out when they actually do it. Like, but the last couple of years in a regular season, I couldn't really do that as much as I would like because they were actually a pretty decent regular season team. But in the playoffs, that's where I come back strong. That's where everybody comes back strong. When it comes to the Cowboys, they always find a way to screw things up as usual. But this season, like I said, it is what it is. Just from an analysis perspective, yeah, they are a bad team this year, and it's like I was saying, like it's going to be a weekly episode of seasonal depression because more than likely the Texans are going to do very similar to what the Eagles did to them this past weekend. So, but I think when it comes to that fan base, just to kind of like wrap that part up, when it comes to the delusional fans, I think that's a relatively small portion of Cowboys fans, but they're very loud about it. They're the ones that are going on social media. Those are the ones going on TikTok or on Instagram and saying the most outlandish, embellished things that you could think of from a Cowboys fan perspective. But I mean, I know Cowboys fans that know, like, yeah, we're a subpar team. We're not going anywhere this year. So it's just, usually what the media focuses on or what they really kind of aim at are those crazy Cowboys fans that embellish to the nth degree or are so dramatic about their team that when the Cowboys falter, like they typically do, it kind of comes back full circle, I guess. And the media kind of does a good job of like literally just kind of like pounding them into submission.
The media knows what they're doing. Point blank, period. And they always will, which is why they are still employed and which is why Stephen A. Smith is as rich as he is. So
I think it's funny that he does it every single week. Like, I think it's funny. So I take I at least get the entertainment value from it.
For sure.
But with that said, we'll transition to our next game, and that is going to be what was probably one of the better games from this past weekend. And that was the Steelers going on the road, defeating the Commanders by the score of 28-27. This was really kind of a back and forth game. And it actually came down towards, Kev was mentioning it earlier. What was it? Russell Wilson was able to get an offsides on a hard snap or a hard count and force the offsides, was able to get a first. They were able to get a first down?
First down. It was 4th and 1.
So, and then that ended up being the deciding factor in that game. But I will say, they traded for Mike Williams, took him from the Jets, and he was the one that ended up getting the game-winning touchdown. And I will say on that particular play, that was a drop in the bucket by Russell Wilson. That was a good pass despite getting a heavy pass rush on that play. It was a perfect play executed to perfection. And it was good for Mike Williams to finally get on the board because I know he's had kind of an up and down year, whether it was with the Jets or, now he's kind of on an up based off of getting that game winning touchdown against the Commanders this past weekend. And dude, like when it comes to the Steelers, they're rolling. They're currently in first place in the AFC North. They have a better winning percentage than the Ravens at this point. And that decision to put Russell Wilson in as a starting quarterback, despite how effective Justin Fields played early on in the season, it seems like that decision is bearing fruit for the Steelers writ large, and we'll see how long it can continue moving forward. But Kev, to kick this one to you, I mean, looking back at that Steelers and Commanders game from this past weekend, now that the Steelers are sitting at a 7-2 record, what's the ceiling for the Steelers, knowing where they are at this point in the season?
It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like you said in the intro, Justin Fields was doing a good enough job to have the Steelers where they were in first place. They were being, they weren't being, they were breaking the mold, right? Nobody really saw them being as competitive as they were. Russell Wilson was hurt. Obviously, he was coming off that situation in Denver. Justin Fields was a project quarterback. He wasn't going to start. He was going to compete for it. And then he wasn't competing until Russell got hurt. Then there were rumors they were going to have him on kick returns. Like the drama in Pittsburgh during the NFL offseason was unlike any other because there were so many question marks looming. Everybody knew that the defense was going to be elite, but it was how are we going to put points up on the board? They haven't been able to do that since Ben Roethlisberger retired. Justin led them to what? A 5-2 record before Russ came in?
Yeah, they were effective.
It was at least 4 or 5 wins. They were getting it done. It just wasn't done in the modern day era to where your quarterback's supposed to be passing for this amount of yards, having this many passing touchdowns, or whatever the case may be. Excuse me. When it comes to the NFL as a whole, to me, all that matters is winning. I don't really care how you get it done. Not everyone is going to be Patrick Mahomes, but at the same time, not everybody is going to be, like a Cooper Rush performance from this past week. So that's why it's like, take what you can get. There's no reason to change it up. I was on the side of leaving Justin Fields in. But to get back on track, what Pittsburgh has been able to do since Russ has been inserted has been exceptional. They have been able to move the ball a lot more effectively. They have a more pocket present quarterback. They have a more veteran present quarterback as to someone that can make plays with their arm and also with their legs without having to do anything crazy. He's not going to go and rush for 20 yards down the field and make someone miss, but he is elusive enough in the pocket to still find a way to get things done and throw on the move and not sit in the pocket like a statue in a garden. Joe Flacco. Russell's getting it done like he should. They added another weapon in Mike Williams. Obviously, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are a pretty solid, if not above average, running back duo. So the running attack is very, very potent. And then, like I said, George Pickens is one of the better receivers one of the better up-and-coming receivers in the NFL. Now you pair him with somebody like Mike Williams, who was able to get underneath that Russell Wilson throw. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are sitting at a 7-2 record. And you can't really say much about them other than they're just finding ways. It wasn't the greatest game for Russ, only throwing 50%. But on the other side, Jaden Daniels also had a back down to earth realization game as well, to where he only threw for 50% completion percentage as well. Pittsburgh's defense was able to get around, stay in the backfield relatively consistently. They only averaged 2.7 yards a carry on the ground, and I say that in the sense of for Washington. But Jaden Daniels was sacked 3 times also, so he wasn't able to have his presence felt on the football field, and that's because the Pittsburgh Steelers are definitely known for being a defensive present team. So when it comes to what the Steelers can do moving forward, if they continue this recipe, very minimal turnovers. I know Russ had a pick, but just keep that to a low, if not a 0. You find a way to run the ball for over 125 yards a game. They had 140. It was 3.3 yards per carry, but they were able to keep the play action honest, and that is what you want for a quarterback who's getting older and needs to create separations from his receivers and also needs to make sure that he's keeping the linebackers honest. And Russ thrives in situations to where he's able to read the field successfully. If they continue this formula, I don't see why they can't compete for an AFC title. I don't see why they can't go to Arrowhead. I don't see why they can't compete to go to a Super Bowl because, again, Russ isn't going out here, since getting the starting nod and throwing 2 picks a game. turning the ball over consistently, getting strip sacked. He's playing well, turnover free for the most part, and he's finding ways to make his receivers better. And if that's going to continue, that's going to be a very, very scary formula for Kansas City or anybody competitive in the AFC. Because if you're able to do this to a very, very hot Washington Commanders team, yes, it was a 1 point game. Yes, it came down to an offsides. But again, that's what you get with a veteran quarterback. I don't know if Justin's able to get them offsides. I don't know if anybody believes that Pittsburgh was going to snap the ball if Justin was under center. Russ has been there time and time again. He's a Super Bowl champion. He knows what it's like to play under pressure. And I think that hard count was able to make that rookie on Washington jump for a reason because he himself felt like Russell could actually snap the football. You know what you get with Russ. You know what you get with Justin. I think Russ was what they needed to push them over the edge because two of those losses that Pittsburgh has, or should I say their only two losses, came in embarrassing fashion because one of them sadly came against the Colts. Justin had a couple of turnovers, and then I don't know what was the first loss.
They lost to the Cowboys.
And they lost to the Cowboys because the defense kind of fell asleep and the offense went a little stagnant because they weren't able to move it downfield. And Dallas wins basically at the end of the fourth quarter. So you have some nail biter losses that may or may not would have happened with Russell Wilson. We don't know that, but since Russ has been inserted, Pittsburgh has done relatively well. This was a good game for them to win. But overall, I think Pittsburgh can definitely compete in the AFC for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to kind of set the landscape as best as I can here. When it comes to the AFC at this point, they currently have the third best winning percentage throughout the entire conference. Obviously, the Chiefs have the best because they're still undefeated, and then the Bills are sitting at 8-2. So the Steelers are in that third position right now. But Kevin, I'm looking at their schedule for the next couple of weeks, and dude, they got some tough matchups coming here. They have plenty of divisional matchups over the next couple of weeks. They got to play the Ravens this week. That's going to be a tough one. Now, they are playing at home. It'll be a very competitive game in my mind with that one because, when I look at this Sunday game, granted, I know we're still relatively early before we finally start getting to crown these divisional winners, but that game could have a very big implication for the rest of the division just because if the Steelers were able to win that game at home, now granted, they would play each other again later in the year, that would at least give the Steelers the inside track to be able to win that division because the Browns aren't going to win that. The Browns are in last place. They're not going anywhere. The Bengals have been relatively subpar the entire year, despite the fact that Joe Burrow has been lighting it up offensively. It's just the defense has been giving up way too many points. So really their only competition is the Ravens. And then after that, they play the Browns. That should be a win. Even though they're on the road for that one, I think Pittsburgh's going to handle their business on that one and then win that game. Then they play the Bengals on the road. That's going to be very interesting because we're going to see whether or not that Steelers defense could hold up against that Joe Burrow-led offense. And truth be told, Kev, like when I look at that game in particular, that game could really be a track meet. Because if that Steelers defense does not perform against that Cincinnati offense, we could look at something very similar to what happened between the Bengals and the Ravens from this past what was Thursday. It was a Thursday night game.
Almost, not almost, but a couple days ago.
Yeah. So, and then they play the Browns again. They play the Eagles. They play the Ravens again, and then they finish out the year playing the Chiefs and then the Bengals again. So they have a tough road here. I'm not going to say it's like the easiest road that they have. They have two very winnable games against the Browns. Like those should be wins for them. But you play the Bengals twice, you play the Ravens twice, and then you play the Eagles and the Chiefs. That's going to be a tough uphill battle for them. Now, granted, like you said, if they play complementary football where Russ is doing just enough to be able to not turn the ball over, get his guys in position, make accurate passes, and execute at around like 65% for his completions, and they really rely on that ground game in Najee and Jalen, they will be able to score points. And you pair that with that defense, I think they'll be fine. It's going to come down to, can Russ play at the level that they need him to play at like he used to when he was a member of the Seattle Seahawks? If he's able to do that, where completing a high percentage of his passes, not turning the ball over, I think there's a very good chance that the Steelers will at least position themselves as a top 3 team in the AFC. At worst, I think top 4. It's going to be, I think, either that 3 or that 4 spot for them as far as I see it. The only way they would lose that 3 spot is if they were to lose it to the Ravens, because I don't think there's really another team in the AFC that's going to be able to catch up to them. It's really going to be that the Ravens or the Steelers for that 3rd spot in the AFC, because I don't think either one of them are going to catch the Bills, and nobody's catching the Chiefs. The Chiefs have the inside track to get that 1st seed, unless the Chiefs really start faltering, which they've been kind of close to hinting at that the last couple of weeks. They haven't played that great, but they've been winning really by the skin of their teeth the last couple of weeks. But no, I like this team. Compared to what my expectation was for the Steelers going into the year, they have exceeded my expectations by leaps and bounds. It's just going to come down to, in these divisional matchups against the Bengals and the Ravens, can they execute at a high level, limit their turnovers, and make the plays towards the end of the game when they need to? Because really, like, when I look at these divisional games between the Ravens and the Bengals, these are going to be competitive games. These are going to be really one possession, nail biter type games. And it's going to come down to who's going to be able to execute at a higher level at the end of the 4th quarter. But no, I like where this team is at. I think Mike Tomlin's done a fantastic job in coaching this team up, putting his guys in a position to be able to win. And, we're 10 weeks into the year, and they have the 3rd best record in the AFC. So really, I got to give them respect for what they've done at this point. But now we're really kind of getting into the home stretch of the regular season, where you're either going to be a full-blown contender, or you're going to be a little bit short.
Or you're going to be a pretender.
Yeah.
You're going to be a pretender. It's make or break right now at this time of year, every single year. It's crazy to say. I was telling you on my drive home, that it's crazy to think we're halfway through the season already. We wait all year for this, and it flies by faster than anything you could fucking think of. Excuse me, my language, but
I know, it's crazy.
It's insane to think about. But yeah, we're here.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a good win for them. A good win over the Commanders. I'm not really too worried about the Commanders. The Commanders have had a great start to this year. Jaden Daniels looks like he's well on his way to getting Rookie of the Year based off of how he's played. I will say, like, when it comes to him, he has definitely not played his best since injuring his ribs. I wouldn't be surprised if he's been playing with broken ribs. So
maybe
I don't know to what extent.
Or
how
teams
bad
are figuring him out.
It could be. And I will say, going up against the Steelers defense is not an easy task.
Hell no.
And they scored 27 points against a pretty legit defense. So I'm telling you, like, that kid is nice. It's just, but
Jaden's gonna be a beast.
I think the ribs are. He may not really. I don't know to what extent or what depth that he's talking about with his ribs, but I guarantee he's probably played with either cracked ribs or maybe even like a broken rib or two, and still going out there and playing pretty well. But no, this is a great game. So. Came right down to the end, and the Steelers were just able to make some more plays over the Commanders to give them that win. And now we get to the part of the episode where I'm basically just going to stand back and let Kev do his thing. I will do the lead-in just because I got to set it up. But we're going to go over the Bills and the Colts game from this past weekend. The Bills won this game by the score of 30-20. When you look at this game from the quarterback play, not great from either Joe Flacco or Josh Allen. Josh Allen had 2 picks in this game. Joe Flacco had 2 touchdowns, but he had 3 interceptions. And on the ground, Jonathan Taylor, 21 carries, 114 yards. James Cook, 19 carries, 80 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, really, like, this game, when I look back at it, this game really got off to a bad start with the Colts getting picked off literally on the first play for a pick 6. And I will say that the Colts were able to kind of somewhat keep up pace with the Bills, but going into that second half, they really just couldn't do anything of significance. And there were plays that there were opportunities to be had for the Colts to be able to really kind of make this a competitive game towards the end. They just could not make them. And, the Bills get a huge road win at this point in the season. They're currently sitting at 8-2. They're first place in the AFC East. They're the second best team in the AFC. And when it comes to the Colts are sitting at 4-6 in a gettable division. The Texans have not been playing that well this year. Granted, the Texans are 6-4, but in my opinion, it's a gettable division. But the Colts falter in this one at home, and it really does degrade their chances of potentially competing for that number 1 spot in the AFC South. Now, Kev, I know you're going to about to take off on this one, so I'm just going to basically sit and chill in the cut for 5 to 10 minutes, take as much time as you need. But Kev, when you look at the state of the Colts, where would you assess things at this point right now?
You could keep it pan because I got a couple questions for you. You know, in a situation to which you draft a quarterback at a certain point, obviously you're in the same situation with Drake. It's live. It's going on live now, so you didn't have last season like I did. But typically, when you draft a quarterback, in our experience, the best way they learn is what way?
I think there's actually two ways. But one is actually getting game experience, going out there and playing, making mistakes and trying to learn from your mistakes. Or,
Correct. N-
and this is something that has happened with multiple players, is you basically sit the first season, you allow to kind of see the game from the sideline. Like you could look at like Aaron Rodgers watching Brett Favre from the sideline, or even Tom Brady looking at Drew Bledsoe from the sideline for that first year. And being able to kind of, take the game in from just a total perspective from the sideline, going through the game on film, and really trying to manage things well during practice. Because, if you're not getting game time throughout the season, you at least have to make the most of your practice sessions, your film sessions, and just your commitment to the team by working out, being a focal point of what I would say is like the chemistry of the team, even though that they're not out there playing on the field. But when it comes to Anthony Richardson's perspective, the best way that you're probably going to learn is going out there and trying to make the best of the situation as you can. You're going to make mistakes early on in your NFL career. Every quarterback does that, but you have to get the game experience because at least that's something you could build off of the longer that you're in the league.
Thank you. So, again, this is going to be a very interactive subject for a couple minutes until I go crazy. So, basically, what you're saying is when you spend a high draft pick, you typically want to get a return on investment, aka you got to see him improve, you got to see the development there, but you're preparing in that season, in that follow up. You're not going to win right off the bat. It is very rare when a first round quarterback absolutely takes off and goes to the playoffs. You got to be a crazy talent like a
Like a Pat,
Jaden Daniels.
a
Yeah,
Pat.
exactly.
Yeah.
Something insane that doesn't happen very often. But for the most part, it is going to be a developmental year or two. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, when we were talking about the draft 2 years ago, and we were talking about what Anthony Richardson brought to the table, when we went over his complete, stats, draft stock, everything, when we went over his complete synopsis of a player profile, we both agreed he was a project quarterback for whoever drafts him. Correct or incorrect?
100%. You mentioned
Ex-
that even when he was with Florida, like when he gets to the NFL, it wasn't just you talking about it. I mean, there were plenty of scouts that were talking about whoever drafts him. It's going to be a long haul as far as building him up, trying to build his progression to be a functional NFL quarterback, despite the athleticism that he brought to the table.
Thank you. Again, I'm merely asking these questions because I know for the most part we are usually on the same page, but there are some segments to where you completely disagree, and that's what makes this podcast fantastic. But in this case, I'm glad we're on the same page. So as it stands right now, Anthony Richardson is 5-5 in his career because last season he got hurt his shoulder, his throwing arm at that, and he was shut down for the season after week 5 or 6. So his rookie campaign was cut short. We saw flashes of what he could bring to the table in Shane Steichen's offense with, I think, maybe 1 or 2 games with Jonathan Taylor involved, not even starting. So the potential was there. But again, it was not to its fullest capacity, right?
No, I agree.
Would you say that last season was a wash for Colts fans? Would you say that we had no chance?
You guys were competitive. Guys had a chance to make the playoffs.
Who was the quarterback last year?
I believe it was Gardner Minshew.
That's interesting because we have the same team for the most part offensively, a healthy Jonathan Taylor. Another year with Shane Steichen, which means everybody should be familiar with the offense. Anthony Richardson is healthy. And we're not very good. Yes, offensively we have struggled, but the defense has had games where they just quite frankly cannot stop the run. We've barely been able to get to the quarterback at a consistent clip. We're not able to tackle in the open field. There's a number of things. However, outside of this game coming down to a 10-point game, I believe we are one of the only teams, if not the only team in the NFL in history, guys, that's over 100 years of football, to where each of our first 9 games were decided by one score. So that means we're not just competitive, we're in every single game. We're within a field goal or a touchdown. And that's with Anthony Richardson's completion percentage issues. That's with us being one of the dead last rush defenses in the league. That's with the injuries to the offensive and defensive lines. That is with the incompetence of a head coach in play calling. That is with Joe Flacco playing in the last few games. Again, outside of this Buffalo Bills game.
Yeah, I was about to say up until this game.
So let it be known, this team, as dysfunctional as it is, as lackluster of talent in terms of names that we may not have, we're finding ways to stay in games. So then our head coach decides to go and bench Anthony Richardson. Now, the controversy comes behind the whole head tap thing, which is completely inappropriate. I don't think that that was justified. You and I agree completely. There's no place in the league for someone quitting. Damian Woody put it perfectly right after the game on Monday. We have to block for you for 4 quarters. You got to sit there and throw the ball. He didn't say that the quarterback position wasn't hard. He didn't say that it wasn't physically grueling. But it is one of the easier jobs if you have a clean pocket. If you're not touched, you just got to throw the ball. You might make a bad read and throw an interception, but in terms of physical aggression, physical stature, sit back there and throw the ball. You're not running into linemen. You're not having to shove your head into another defensive tackle. You don't have to put your shoulder down for extra yards unless you're scrambling, which, again, you don't have to because you can slide or run out of bounds. I digress. Even with all the issues that we had, we were competitive. We were 4-4 when we benched Richardson. Richardson, I thought, was going to get a nice little slap on the wrist. You got to learn a lesson, hit the bench for a game or two, and we're going to throw you back in there. And if the game is close and Joe can't get it done, we're going to put you back in. No. That's not what happens. You want to know what happens? We have a drunk and a drug addict for an owner. We have a GM that is not only incompetent in the offseason, but blind in saying that he likes what we have in-house. Yes, we have talent. Yes, we're able to develop very well. As you can see, Darius Shaquille Leonard, before all the injuries, was a second-round pick that no one thought would be anything. He was absolutely sensational prior to the back surgeries. Zaire Franklin, 7th-round pick out of Syracuse, one of the best tackling linebackers in football. Julian Blackmon, coming off of an ACO, one of the better free safeties in the league. Kenny Moore out of Valdosta State, and obviously Grover Stewart, and more and more and more. So we can definitely draft. We can draft the shit out of players. That's not the problem. But when you have capital and you choose not to bring in talent, when you want to retain your head coach in Frank Reich for a number of years, despite his play calling being questionable at best, because obviously it's in the past, I'm going to let it be, but I'm just saying everyone knows how much I hated Frank. You go and you hire an brilliant offensive-minded quarterback, or offensive coordinator in Shane Steichen, who just took Philadelphia to the Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts, and you draft a project. I need to emphasize this further. Project. Project means something that needs to be worked on, something that needs to be thought through, something that needs to be patient with. Quarterback. A project quarterback. You bench him after 10 games. Now, on what earth do you draft a project quarterback and you put in a 38 to 39-year-old veteran QB for the remainder of the season to say that we are in win now mode? I'm trying to remain calm because I had enough of an outburst yesterday. Mind you, I was working, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday. I work at a brewery. So I had to kind of remain calm for the customers in the building. I did my very best. There were a couple of outbursts that slipped out. I had to walk to the back. But a lot of my emotions were in the break room and after work. So I got a little bit of it out. But for the sake of today's podcast, I need you guys to understand. I'm pissed. I'm so agitated with the dysfunction of this franchise. Kyle knows a few years ago, I was ready to hang it up. I was ready to give up on the entire team, my fandom and everything, because we had blown a 36-3 lead against the Minnesota Vikings. It was the biggest comeback, worst blown lead in NFL history. We go and draft a quarterback that I didn't want, but I had hope for because I knew the talent was there. You know that the accuracy was a problem. You know that the physical attributes were there. We had never had a mobile quarterback in franchise history, at least not one that was serious. I knew for the next 3 to 4 years it wasn't going to be anything of Super Bowl stature, but I was going to hope in the second, maybe even, in the third, maybe even second year, we would compete for a playoff spot because, hell, Gardner Minshew did it last year. So at 4-4, head tap aside, you go and demolish your rookie quarterback's confidence and say, we're going with Joe for the rest. Are you stupid? You have to be the most ignorant, overbearing, asshole head coach to go and bench your project that you said, that you, Shane Steichen, said in training camp, we know we have to build him up. We know this is going to take time. And you go and throw Anthony under the bus. Again, I have to clarify, I am not defending him taking himself out of the game. So for those of you that are going to carry that comment on, go somewhere else, because that's not what this is about. Anthony Richardson has played 10 games in the NFL, and he is getting punished for the incompetencies of a franchise that can't get its head out of his ass because we haven't recovered since Peyton Manning was released from neck surgery. We draft Andrew Luck and basically kill him because of a stupid GM that couldn't protect him and a head coach that couldn't focus, let alone structure a team to follow him. And then you go and you bring in Frank Reich, who had a good 2-3 year stretch at most, didn't know how to run the ball, and got him killed. Andrew retires, and then we go through this quarterback carousel for the next 8 seasons, and you're going to sit here and tell me the quarterback that we draft with the number 4 overall pick in the NFL draft, not 14, not 44, not 144, not 444, the 4th, the number before 5, with the scouting prospect of everything behind him, the draft stock, the reviews, everything. You knew Anthony Richardson was not going to be a quarterback that was going to immediately bring you a championship, let alone a playoff appearance. And in his first full year healthy after an injury, you throw him out there for 8 games and say, we've seen enough. What does that say about this franchise? What does that say about the culture in Indianapolis? Oh, well, you couldn't get it done, so you're gone. But when we were sitting there going through Nick Foles and Ellinger and Matt Ryan being in win now mode, that was justifiable? You look like a bunch of idiots back then, and that was just a few years ago. But I got it. You know, Matt Ryan was just a few years off of an MVP season. Matt Ryan had one of the worst offensive lines in Atlanta. Matt Ryan could not stay healthy in that final year. We had one of the best offensive lines the season before that. He was definitely going to come in and help. He was atrocious. Nick Foles hanging on the drapes of a Super Bowl from 2017. We're going to get playoff Super Bowl, Nick. He looked worse than Matt Ryan. Anthony Richardson's done nothing wrong. He's doing exactly what the scouting report said. Struggling, learning, developing. And you threw him off to the side to prove a point. I would have understood the punishment for the tap out, a game, maybe 2 at most, to teach him a lesson to say your time in this league is not guaranteed. You got to earn it. You got to earn your teammates' trust and respect back. Maybe there's a bigger issue behind this in the locker room. Maybe AR's an asshole. Maybe he doesn't want to work. Maybe he's too cocky. Maybe he's arrogant. I don't know. But what I do know is that there are season ticket holders that are revoking their season tickets because of how badly this organization is run. I don't care that he can throw 80 yards on a flick of the wrist. I don't care if Anthony Richardson can run a 4.5 40. I don't care if he has a 44-inch vertical. I want to win football games. I want to enjoy Sundays. I am tired of literally dreading to turn on either Sunday Ticket or just my TV to watch my favorite football team of basically my entire existence on earth, because I've been a Colts fan since 1998, which was, for those of you that are unaware, Peyton Manning's rookie season. And I've watched football with my dad for years. Did we win every year? Absolutely not. Was I spoiled growing up? Damn right. Well, I wasn't as spoiled as Kyle having 6 Super Bowls, but I knew what it was like to win and at least compete and try. We went through the ups and the downs with the carousel of the quarterbacks and Andrew Luck being injured and all these things. Trust me, I get it. I'm not sitting here saying we got to win every year, but this is ridiculous. Joe Flacco has been horrendous. Decision-making, inability to move in the pocket, poise in the pocket. Sure, can he be more accurate here and again? Yeah, that's great. What is accuracy going to do for us if we're losing games? We're 4-6, and as Kyle said, we are still very much alive in the AFC South, which is embarrassing to say because Houston is such a good football team. But we took them to the brink in both divisional games we played them in. We lost by a total of 5 points in 2 games. Anthony Richardson needs time. You're not giving him time. It was just announced today that Joe Flacco is still QB1. The further this goes, the more he don't want to play for you. The further this goes, the worse it's going to be for him to come back. The further this goes, the more you alienate the fans of this franchise. You're telling me you were so focused on security risks that you were taking people's free AR signs in the stadium? You're so focused on the media backlash and the PR that's coming for you guys making a terrible decision that you are literally letting a 22-year-old quarterback sit on a bench because you don't have the patience to develop him. If that's the case, why in God's name did you draft him? I would have rather you draft a kicker than get everybody's hopes up to bench him in 10. There was never a chance or a scenario on this earth that any real Colts fan saw the Colts making the Super Bowl this season. But you think that Joe Flacco puts you in a position to do so. Wake up. You're all deserved to be fired. You're all morons. And I hope somebody runs you each out of town because this is just absolutely embarrassing. I don't want to watch this team anymore. And what happens when Shane gets on the podium today? Well, it's a trust the process thing. Well, what's the process? We're working on it. Don't worry about it. Or whatever the hell he said today. That's what you tell the media? What are we, in Philadelphia? The fuck is that? Trust the process? Suddenly you're Joel Embiid? Last I checked, you're an Indianapolis Colt. You're no longer a Philadelphia Eagle. Focus on what the hell you have in front of you. I'm tired of this top 15, top 16 draft pick. I want to compete. I want to do something. Anthony Richardson can't get you more wins than this? Anthony Richardson can't be more competitive than this? Joe Flacco had 4 turnovers yesterday. Anthony Richardson hasn't had 4 turnovers all season. I don't get it. He makes bad plays. He's basically a rookie. Anthony Richardson's inaccurate. Josh Allen couldn't hit the front side of a board his rookie year, and he's an all-pro. It took years to develop him. People were quick to throw him out because he came from Wyoming or whatever the hell. But now, he's an incredible all-pro MVP candidate, and the Buffalo Bills are 8-2. But it took a while. Patience is a fucking virtue, my man. You can't just throw Anthony Richardson out there and expect him to do something when you don't know what you're doing as a coach. All I'm saying is, if you want to lose, just say it. I'd rather you just tell the fans, I don't know what I'm doing. It's the blind leading the blind. It starts at the top. If Jim Irsay is telling Shane to do it, then I take back everything I said about Shane. If it's Chris Ballard trying to save his job, then you can kiss my ass and get out of my franchise because there's no room for GMs looking to save their ass when there's a fan base that is paying hundreds upon hundreds of dollars to watch this team play, to put out shit like that. And the only reason this game was within 10 points is because Joe Flacco scored with Alec Pierce with 2 seconds to go. So don't get it twisted. This was way worse than what the score leads it up to be. And the best part about this game, Josh Allen played like shit. So I can't even blame the defense. Despite Joe Flacco having 4 turnovers, it was damn near a 7-point game most of this entire game. So shout out to the defense for holding it down. But Lord knows, if Anthony Richardson does not get another start this season, there will be hell to pay because I promise you, Colts fans are not going to be selling out Lucas Oil Stadium. Colts fans are going to riot. I'm going to lose my mind. And Anthony Richardson is going to be a broken shell of what he should have been. And the ultimate karma is going to be when he leaves or you cut him and a patient coach coaches him up to be the potential Pro Bowl quarterback he can be. And that's what's going to bite the Colts in the ass. And that's all I got to say. Because Lord knows this can go on forever.
Well, I knew you had plenty to say there. Yeah, what else do you want me to say? Um, it's one of those situations when I look at Anthony Richardson. Obviously, there's not much that I can really rebuke about the part of developing him and trying to get him to the point where he's a functional quarterback in the NFL just from an accuracy perspective. The only thing that I could say, now granted, I don't watch every single Colts game. Obviously, the ins and outs of that franchise and Anthony Richardson a lot more than I do. But the glaring weakness of his play so far has been the accuracy. And I understand all the athletic traits that he carries. I understand the promise or the potential that comes along with his presence on that team, and that may happen over time. That could be a slow burn, and I don't think that the Colts should just give up on him within like a year or two after they drafted him. Because Kev, we could look back at Peyton Manning. Did Peyton Manning have the most glorious start in the NFL?
Horrendous. He led the NFL. He actually held he held the rookie record for most interceptions in a season until Russell Wilson broke it with 28 interceptions in his rookie year, 24 interceptions in his rookie year, whichever one. Horrible. He was horrendous.
And where did Peyton end up?
Canton, Ohio.
Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson is going to go straight to Canton. I'm not saying that, but I don't think that at this rate he's going to last much longer in Indianapolis if they don't at least give him the opportunity to be able to play and make these mistakes. Because whether the Colts fans like it or not, whether the organization likes it or not, this team is not going to be at the top of the AFC with the way that Anthony Richardson is playing, or I mean, even with Joe Flacco. But at least, like, if I were looking at it this way, I could at least say we're giving our young quarterback time to be able to develop. We have to allow him to be able to make the mistakes so that he can at least build at least somewhat of a foundation of game experience to be able to learn from those mistakes so that he can learn from those mistakes and try to apply the solutions to that further down the road. And I think one of the things that a lot of NFL organizations fail to realize is that a lot of times when it comes to developing quarterbacks, it's usually going to take about 3 or 4 years before it really starts to bear any fruit. There are exceptions to that. You could look at Patrick Mahomes. First year that he's a starter, he throws 50 touchdowns. But you compare it to Brady. Brady was not the most functional starter as far as like throwing for 4,000, 5,000 yards in his first couple years. That's not what they were looking for. They focused on using him when they needed to and relying on the ground game. And Kev and I have talked about this ad nauseum for years when it comes to the Colts. What is the one thing that Colts fans would like no other when it comes to the offensive side of the ball? Run the ball. You have Jonathan Taylor, who's one of the most functional running backs in the NFL. That guy should be getting 25 to 30 carries every game. Now, maybe they don't do it as much because now it's more of like a running back by committee. But bare minimum, he should be getting at least 20 carries no matter what the score is. I don't care if they're down by 10 points. I don't care if they're up by 10 points. Or if it's more than that or less than that, doesn't matter. He should be getting those types of carries every single game, and probably more than likely it should be around 25 carries. Like, that's where I would be if I was a Colts fan. I mean,
or at least 25 touches with receptions and stuff.
Sure.
Like attempts.
Sure. And it got to the point a couple years ago where the fans were outright saying, run the damn ball with Jonathan Taylor. It was like a 4-word phrase that the fans were essentially screaming to the team about. And Kev, has Jonathan Taylor really lost a step here? Have you seen any sort of drop off? I mean, I understand that he's had a couple injuries. That happens. But have you noticed any sort of precipitous drop off to where he can't go out there and bring a functional run game to that offense?
Nope.
Have you seen that?
Nope.
Still has all the components of being an elite running back in the NFL.
All the bells and whistles.
See, if it
And
were
he can
me,
run block too.
if it were up to me, rely on him. Let him be essentially the workman of the offense. The biggest thing is whether or not that he'd be able to hold up from injuries. That's just, we just don't know. But that's what they should be doing. I understand, like, you still have to utilize Anthony Richardson. Like, he still has to go out there and make passes. He still has to be accurate. But, Kev, the only thing that I will say is just looking up the last couple games of his stats. When I look at these completion percentages, they're not pretty. I'm going to go through. Just going to go through the games that I see right here. Week 1, 47.4%. Week 2, 50. Week 3, 50. Gets the Steelers in week 4, 75%. But he only threw for 71 yards in that game.
Because he got hurt.
He got hurt. Comes back against the Dolphins in October, 41.7. And then against the Texans, obviously that was the game where he tapped out, 31.2. And that was a bad game.
And that was also the game where I told you we had 7 drops. Where we went over the film and he was putting the ball on a dot, and that would have been a 60% completion percentage game.
That was also the same game where he had one of the worst interceptions I've seen.
Terrible before the half. Yes.
Right before the half on their side of the field. And it literally the next play after that interception, the Texans scored a touchdown.
I know.
So I understand where you're coming from when it comes to the potential of what he brings to the table. The only thing that I could say is he has to go out there and perform better. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that.
Correct.
And for me, I would at least be patient enough to let him go through it. Let him go through it. In the meantime, while he's going through it, rely on JT. I would rather us run it 35 times, 40 times a game. Run basically, Kev, you're probably going to find this disrespectful. I would rather let them run like a Navy-style offense in college where they run the ball 35, 40 times and they maybe throw it 10 to 15 times a game if they get about like 50, 55 plays of offense in a game. I would rather have that and just rely on the run game. It's like, listen, we have one of the better running backs in the NFL, and we're going to rely on that. We're going to lean into that, and we're going to use Anthony Richardson sparingly, but we're going to use him enough to where he gets solid game reps of trying to be as accurate as possible. But
I say 25 and 25. And again, that also depends on the flow of the game. If we're up, if we're losing, obviously the run kind of diminishes if we're down by double digits early on.
Yeah,
you got to get back into it.
Well, there's a style that I'm really trying to hone in on here.
No,
when it comes to the
and trust me, I get exactly what you're saying. My biggest thing is I don't know a competent, realistic, and knowledgeable Colts fan, because I will say there are a lot of people that I met while in Indy that didn't really know much about it. They just supported it because there really isn't much to do in Indy during football season outside of basketball. But I don't know a real fan that's going to sit here, turn the TV on, and say, "All right, Colts going Super Bowl today." You know what I'm saying? Like I don't. Because
I don't see that.
Everyone knows he's a project quarterback. I want competitive, I want development, and I want to see some growth. And if we win, fantastic. But I am okay because we drafted him at 4. Because again, I said this 100 times. He is a project quarterback. I know it's going to take time. So Sundays may be a little bit grueling for a year or 2, but hopefully we get that ROI, return on investments, in years 3, 4, maybe if they get the 5th option and extend him, maybe we get some good years at the back end of his contract. But those first 2 years, with the first one already being a wash because of the injury, this and the next year are going to tell me what I need to know about Anthony Richardson. But you stunting his growth, crushing his confidence, and then putting in a guy that clearly is not better than him in any way, shape, or form. Again, accuracy might be fantastic, but we are still losing games the same way. Close. And as sure as shit isn't because Joe's getting injured, it's because Joe's turning the ball over. Joe, I think I would be less upset if I didn't hear the phrase, win now. We've lost the last 2, and Joe has had 6 turnovers in 2 games. So in what world is this a team situation. You want to win now, win the fan base back, and show you have a little bit of common sense, and put the guy back in the game that you wasted a 4th overall pick on. Because Lord knows if you do this the rest of the year and you start him again next year, he ain't going to learn much. He's just going to be like, all right, the second I have a bad game, they're just going to yank me out again. Look at Bryce Young. Bryce Young was on the bench for 3-4 games, and the Panthers have won 2 in a row. I'm not comparing the situations, but they put the kid back in. Yes, he was the number 1 overall pick, but the difference from 1 and 4 is goddamn 3 picks. He is still just as important to a franchise because he is our future. And it is detrimental that his confidence remains intact. There was no one in the world that thought Andy Dalton was better than Bryce Young. Yeah, sure, he had a great game the first game he came in for him. 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, something that Bryce Young hadn't done his whole career. Everybody's due up for one game because they ain't seen Andy Dalton in a few years. Nobody knew the Red Rifle still had a little bit of kick in it. What happened in Pittsburgh? Nobody knew Joe Flacco could do that in Indy's system because we know what he did with Kevin Stefanski leading the Browns to the playoffs. But they're 2 different systems. And you're going to sit here and you're going to tell me that Joe Flacco is better than Anthony Richardson in all honesty? Outside, again, of the accuracy thing, which we knew, again, if I keep harping on it because if this wasn't something on the scouting report, if this is something that no one noticed or didn't put 2 and 2 together that was like, his accuracy is like hit or miss here and there. No. Literally, one of Mel Kiper's bullet points is development of throwing between the numbers. We know what he can do down the field, of what he can reach. He's got to hit those 3rd and shorts, 3rd and mids, intermediate passes. Exactly. I couldn't remember the words. It was on the board. Mm-hmm. You knew what you were getting when you drafted him, and you still benched him after 10 games. I am genuinely just dumbfounded. I'm good with losing if he's getting reps. Am I going to be mad on Sunday? Of course. But I know it's the long haul. We're playing the long game here. I'm going to suffer for 2 years because he's going to be competitive for the next 2 to 3 is the hope that we have.
So this is the one question that I have for you long term. This is looking at the next 2 years because this is going to matter.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about another year or 2 of this where he still can't complete passes around 60 to 65%. I mean, dude, we're talking about going from, in some of these games, 40 to 50% to get to 60 to 65. We're talking about 15 percentage points here, 15 to 20 percentage points in completion percentage. If he can't hit that, if he just goes out there every week, but he just cannot hit that, and you deal with that for 3 or 4 years, at that point, would you just kind of accept all right, he's just not accurate. He just...
Exactly. 100%. At that point, you say, you know what? We tried. We gave him 3 full seasons. We had a couple of different coordinators. We tried to bring in some personnel. We beefed up the offensive line. Something, If we're doing our due diligence to surround him with enough talent and protection to where he is just strictly failing at his job as a quarterback to hit the receivers in stride or hit them on the numbers, then we missed. These draft busts happen all the time.
Yeah.
Not everybody pans out. I'm not going to be mad if in 2 years, again, I'll be mad in the moment. But if I look back 20 years from now and I say, damn, what could have been? I'm going to be more mad if we cut him or trade him this offseason. He goes somewhere else and he absolutely shreds. Like I said at the end of my rant. I'm telling you, that Houston game, before the tap out, there were so many drops that people are genuinely overlooking here that they're not paying attention to where receivers literally were getting hit in the hands or it was within the radius of their arms, not an overextension or an overreach down low or outside. It was here or somewhere where they have to pull it as a wide receiver or tight end, and they dropped it. Michael Pittman had a drop touchdown. Godson had a drop touchdown. Alec Pierce had a offensive pass interference called back. A.D. Mitchell had a drop pass. Granson had a drop pass. Nobody wants to talk about that. Those were for critical plays. And playing this game of football in high school, quarterbacks gain confidence with completions. As they move the ball downfield, they start to get a little bit hot. They get warm. All right, yo, coach, what do you got? It puts a pep in the step in the offense. It gives a confidence to the team to see them. They're moving it. Constant drops are not only just ruining Anthony Richardson, it's getting in the receivers' heads. Shit, that was for a first down. Shit, that's the second drop of the game. Shit, we can't catch nothing today. You know what I'm saying? Like, it affects the morale around you when it's not just the QB failing. If he's missing by 20 yards, obviously everyone's going to be frustrated. But 7 drops
There's something
are detrimental.
There's something I want to go back to. And it was something about Joe Flacco that you mentioned with the amount of turnovers that he's had in the last 2 weeks. What was the number once again?
He had 3 interceptions yesterday and a strip sack fumble. So he had 4, and then he had 2 picks against Minnesota.
Okay. Because I'm just looking over AR stats right here. In the first 3 weeks of the season, he had 6 interceptions.
Okay, so then I misphrased it then. I meant he didn't have 4 interceptions in a game, or 4 turnovers in one game. My apologies. Not like in total.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not necessarily like it's not the cleanest start. I mean, just statistically speaking, he's got 4 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, and he's just under 1,000 yards, and it's that 44.4 completion percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just,
I get it.
It's one of those things, man. I understand the potential that you see with him, and hopefully it happens. But dude, I mean, this is like basement level stuff. This is like Tim Tebow level stuff right here.
So then I'll flip it then. You got Drake May, drafted 1 spot ahead of Richardson 2 years later. Let's say the Patriots go on a crazy skid. Drake May just starts missing, and y'all start losing. You giving up to it? What has he started? 3 games thus far?
It's like 3. It's a couple at this point. It's like 3 or 4.
So let's say the rest of the season is completely a wash. Inaccuracy, interceptions, turnovers. You're going to chalk that up to the offensive line and incapabilities of the offensive coordinator. But overall, Drake May is not playing well. Richardson got benched in 10 games. That's not even a full season. Are you benching Drake May in 6 games if he starts to play like ass and not playing him again?
It would depend on if he's turning the ball over consistently. So, like, for example, like when I mentioned AR stats, I mean, 6 interceptions in the first 3 weeks is not, it's not ideal, you know? It's obviously there's room for improvement. When it comes to Drake May, one of the things that I can at least point to throughout the first couple games that he started is that he's not consistently turning the ball over multiple times a game. Now, he's had turnovers. Like, I don't want to miss that point entirely. But when it comes to his total games so far, he's not the reason why that the Patriots are really losing here. Part of it is just the offensive line is not built up the way that it should be. I think there's probably some coaching personnel issues as well, just because, you know, it's Rod's first season as a head coach and it hasn't been the cleanest. But our expectations for the season weren't that high to begin with. The thing that would really kind of point to me if Drake was really starting to regress is he's missing easy passes. He's turning the ball over consistently. And it's just kind of like he's not completing a certain level of percentage of passes that quarterbacks are supposed to make in the NFL. He's not at that point yet.
I get it.
With AR, unfortunately for him, these are some of the things that are plaguing him. The only upside with him, as far as I'm concerned, is that he has not played a full season yet. He's only, technically he's in his second year, but it's only 10 games.
Not even a full.
And the athleticism that he brings to the table is off the charts.
Correct. But it's a dynamic you can't coach. That is just physical attribute.
It comes down to execution. And that's what this really comes down to. He has to start executing at a higher level. If he's not able to do that, despite whatever sort of potential that anybody thinks of him, it's not going to matter if he can't execute. And at a certain point, and I hope he's able to do that farther down the line, is that he just has to execute at a higher level. If he's able to do that, he will be fine. If he doesn't, then
I get it. Trust me, I understand. It is not something that I'm
saying.
And
I want him to succeed. Everybody wants him to succeed.
It is not impossible, is all I'm trying to say. If Josh Allen can overcome the bust narratives that he had as the 10th overall or 8th overall, whatever pick he was back then, and now he's all pro caliber.
Mhm.
That took a few years to do that and a few OCs to do it. I think 2 head coaches, whatever the situation was.
Look at Sam Darnold. I mean, he had a horrendous start with the Jets. Now, I'm gonna take away the Vikings and Jags game this past weekend. That was horrendous. He had 3 interceptions. It should have been 4. But Sam Darnold is now a functional quarterback in the NFL. But it did not start out that way.
No,
People were calling him a bust. And I vividly remember that Monday night game against New England where he was
the
saying,
ghosts.
yeah, I see ghosts. But, I mean, in one sense, it kind of came full circle with him because now he's actually a functional quarterback in the NFL.
And it makes me laugh. You know why? Because a lot of people got a lot of shit to say. Daniel Jones has played like 60-something games in the NFL. That boy got a job. Anthony Richardson plays 10,
He
and
got
he
paid
gets
too.
crucified.
He got
That's
paid too.
all I'm saying. Trevor Lawrence, they looked at his career stats for a number 1 overall pick, the next coming of Jesus Christ. Those
My
numbers
dad,
are pretty mediocre.
you know what my dad calls him? My dad calls him Fabio.
Oh, my dad calls him Sunshine from Remember the
Yeah.
Titans.
Yeah. I mean,
So I know we hopped
hey,
on this for a
the sun
while.
ain't shining in Jacksonville with him there, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, and he might be out for the season depending on that shoulder report that we're going to get in a couple days. But I know this went a lot longer than we expected. Obviously, guys, well, excuse me, I take that back. I had a whole lot to say, and that was fermenting for the last couple of weeks. And I know that we haven't been able to record. So for those of you that are not used to it, these are things that I typically do regularly for my sports teams. So either get used to it or, you don't have to watch. And for those regulars that still come back, I love you and I appreciate you.
I always have a phrase that whenever I say it, it just drives Kev up a wall.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But unfortunately, these things happen,
Since college, I swear to God.
I-
Since college. He's been saying
I
that
s-
for years.
what can I say? It's just one of those phrases that just stuck, I guess.
Make me want
But
a damn sign off right now, but we got one more segment to cover.
yeah, I mean, you really wanted to dive into really kind of one of the standout games that happened, not from this past weekend, but it was actually before this weekend. It was the
Yeah.
the
I
Ravens and the
really
Bengals
wanted
game.
to. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
so
wanted to get your thoughts because I know that you kind of bounced all the segments to me this time. So I'll
Mhm,
give you an opportunity and give my vocal cords a little break here. We saw one hell of a game on Thursday night. I
mhm.
swear the AFC North, when it comes to Joe Burrow versus Lamar Jackson, for the most part, is must-see TV. Although Joe Burrow's 1-6 against Lamar in his career, these games are always finding ways to become again must-see TV. The
Mhm.
Bengals go to Baltimore and they lose 34-35, not because of the lack of offense, not because of the lack of skilled players that absolutely killed it in terms of performing, but there were some missed calls, there were some questionable calls, and there was pretty much no defense played in this game whatsoever. But sometimes a good old-fashioned shootout is quite entertaining.
It's fun.
So I'll definitely ask you this. Is the Bengals season in jeopardy, or can they find a way to turn it around despite having one of the worst defenses in the league?
Well, I think their season has kind of been in jeopardy since the beginning of the year. I mean, listen, as you guys can see, I am a Patriot fan with all the posters behind me, and when they got off to that start this year, where they lost to the Patriots, it was kind of one of those things that Kevin and I have talked about when it comes to the Bengals is that they get off to a slow start every year. And unfortunately for them, it happened again. Now, they were able to rebound. And as of right now, they're only a couple games away from 500. When I look at this team drives me up a wall for so many different reasons. And I'm not even a Bengals fan. The Bengals are a team that they could have a great play offensively where they get a big chunk play. We're talking 20, 30 yards. They move the ball down the field and it gets called back because of a holding penalty, or it gets called back because of a illegal block in the back or illegal formation. It's these mental mistakes that pop up at the worst times possible for the Bengals. And it just happens way too consistently, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball or on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, we could take it back a couple weeks where they're in KC. I know this was earlier in the season. They are one play away from winning that football game. And you know what happens? On fourth down, this is the last, essentially, like game's on the line. KC has to get this first down or the game's over. defensive pass interference, extends the drive, and then KC ends up winning that game. And then you look at this past weekend, or not this past weekend, this past Thursday. I understand that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase lit it up. Kev can tell you the stats. I'm probably going to screw them up here, but I think Jamar Chase went for 11 catches, 264 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, but I think that's what it was.
Yep, that was perfect.
Joe Burrow had like over 400 some yards passing, and I think he had 4 tutties in that game. Is that right,
Correct.
Kev? In any circumstance, when you see those stats, you should win that game. But it didn't happen because the defense gave up 35 points. Now, I understand. You look at Lamar Jackson. You look at the Ravens offense. High-flying offense. One of the most athletic offenses that we've seen led by Lamar. And Derrick Henry has been just an absolute beast. Now, in this game, like he wasn't, I wouldn't say like Derrick Henry really popped off in this game, but he was still functional. But when your defense is getting ran through, like Kim K in that sex video with Ray J, what are you going to do? It's crazy to look at this team. Kev, I know you got to laugh out of that. I know you did. But what else are you going to do? This team offensively is great, but defensively, they just falter at the worst times possible. And unfortunately for them, when it comes to the long-term outlook for this team, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know. I would say that there's an outside chance that they make the playoffs, but they've got an uphill climb here. Like, it's not going to be pretty as far as them potentially making the playoffs. If they do, it's probably going to be a 7 seed. And more than likely, with the defense that they have, they're probably going to get knocked out of the first round of the playoffs unless Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase just light it up. I don't really see this team really getting that far in the playoffs. But as of right now, do I think that there's a chance that they could still make the playoffs? Yeah, it's a small one, but it's not going to be because of the offense. The offense is fine. It's going to be whether or not that defense can perform. And at this point, I just haven't seen anything that kind of points me in that direction. And unfortunately, that's really the main issue with this team is that the offense is going out there and performing at a high level, but the defense is just getting destroyed. You're not going to be a functional team that way. It really is what it is in that regard. And until they address the elephant in the room when it comes to that side of the team, they're going to be probably an average team. They're probably going to be a team that's going to be around like 9-8, maybe 10-7 or 8-9, like with a sub 500 record. So there's a lot left to be desired when it comes to this team. But I'll say it again. I mean, that defense literally just gets ran through every single week. And that team, until they address that, they're not going to go far in the playoffs because of that. And that's even if they make the playoffs. But yeah, like I said, this team is one of the most infuriating teams to watch because I know the potential with that team, and they just fall short because of mental mistakes and that defense. Because it's not because of Joe. That Joe's going out there and lighting it up, despite the fact that his offensive line can't protect him either. So there's 3 main issues on that team. It's the offensive line, mental mistakes, and the defense. If they correct those things, they'll be great. But until then, they're going to be mediocre to average at best.
Well, I mean, obviously, you and I have talked about, especially both on and off the podcast, my player comparison to Joe Burrow. And that is going to be Andrew Luck, a forever sensitive topic for me because he is going through a lot of similar issues that Andrew Luck had to deal with for the majority of his career. Injuries, offensive lining capabilities, lack of defensive efficiency, maybe even playmaking and coaching to a certain extent. But Joe Burrow's doing everything in his power. And I mean, like, I am probably one of the biggest Joe Burrow fans out there. And watching him play football is absolutely insane to see him fight for his life every week. Get knocked down, get pressured, hands in the face, batted balls, everything you can think of in terms of quarterback struggle. And Joe's not the most mobile guy either. So he's moving around that pocket on a regular basis, on every Sunday, if not every game night. and they are not able to capitalize outside of that Super Bowl year and make sure that he's protected. And it's not even the fact that they're not attempting, because they've signed, I think, like since the Super Bowl year, which was 2021, in these last 3 years, they have signed at least 6 to 7 offensive linemen between the guard and tackle positions. They've signed tight ends, they've signed different running backs. They've even tried to extend, if not pair Joe Burrow with even more offensive weapons than they possibly could imagine, just to make sure that they find a way to keep him happy. But the defense continues to fail him. He's not able to stay upright, and he's been injured the majority of his career in terms of he's been hurt probably more times than he's played because of how many major injuries he's sustained thus far. So, like Kyle said, it ain't Joe's fault. It sure as hell isn't Jamar's fault. So, what does it really come down to? Another issue with the front office. And I'll make one final point. Jamar Chase is going to get a bag this offseason. You were going to get him cheap compared to what you're going to have to pay him now at the end of the year. Because he is quite literally showing you, we may win 6 games this year, but I'm going to pop off for 16 to 1,800 yards receiving, and I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure we win. But it isn't going to be because I'm not playing. So, to the GM of Cincinnati, Godspeed, because that man is going to quite literally hold you hostage until you give him that paper. So, on the Baltimore side, I mean, obviously Baltimore found ways to get it done. They were able to score and capitalize. They got that offense humming in every way possible. Derrick Henry's an MVP candidate. Lamar Jackson's going to be another MVP candidate. Their offensive line has improved. So, kudos to them. Don't want to take anything away from them. They're a great football team. They will be competitive in the AFC as well. But Lamar Jackson is also one of those individuals that performs well in the regular season but can never get it done in the postseason. So I will take what he does now as a grain of salt. And when we get into late December, early January, we will start to see what transpires. But again, overall, what an electric game. Disappointing. It ended up falling short for the Bengals because we all know that their record does not reflect their skill and or talent. 4-6 is not what they should be. But again, Kyle and I digress. Cincinnati did it to themselves, and they are not able to not only protect Joe Burrow, but they're not able to get him the ball back on the opposite side when that defense is constantly giving up 28 plus points a game. So we'll see what happens with Cincinnati down the road. But overall, definitely an exciting team to watch. Just must be frustrating as a Bengals fan week in and week out.
You weren't expecting me to say their defense was getting ran through like Kim Kardashian in that
I had
sex
to turn the
tape.
camera off. I started to cry because I laughed so hard. I'm so glad I was muted because my jaw dropped. And I know you saw my jaw on the camera. That
I was trying to keep a straight face the entire time. I don't know how well I did, but I tried my best.
that was so out of pocket. And we will talk more about it after this episode. But that's probably the funniest thing you've ever said on air. And I don't even know what to say about that.
Well, I mean,
We're going to move past it. We're just going
well,
to.
the thing is, unfortunately, when it comes to their defense, I mean, they are getting ran through like that. So
I get it.
yeah,
No,
giving up 30 plus points like that.
I get the
I'm sorry.
emphasis. Trust me.
The jokes make themselves in that regard. I mean, it could be worse though. I mean, thank God Cincinnati is not Dallas, because at least when it comes to Cincinnati, like at least there's like hope for them.
Yeah, because you can win in a shootout.
And they don't get like the level of scorn from the national media like the Cowboys do every single week, even though that I think the media enjoys that. But no, like there's legitimate hope for the Bengals as long as they fix the defense and their offensive line. I think if they really fix those two components, and dude, we were even talking about the offensive line issues when they went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're still
Between
there.
the postseason and the regular season, Joe was sacked 70 plus times that year. That was absurd.
And the thing is, like, I think it may even get to this point where they just need to completely retool their coaching staff when it comes to the offensive line. Because I think this may actually be a strategy issue. This could just be that fundamentally they're just not as sound as they should be on the offensive line. And that's a coaching issue, because they've made strides to try to bring in personnel to bolster up this offensive line. And it's more the same. I think this may be a coaching fundamental shift that they have to do, because you know who they need, Kev? They
Mm.
need to get Dante Scarnecchia in there. They need to get that Patriots offensive line coach back in because, dude, when he was coaching, when Brady was there, they were getting it done.
That boy wasn't touched.
Yeah, like Brady was protected pretty much at all costs, and unfortunately for Cincinnati, it has not worked out, and that's despite the fact that they have probably one of the most functional quarterbacks in the NFL in Joe Burrow. Like, you would think that you would protect your asset, your number one asset on that team, a lot better than they have, and unfortunately for them, it has not worked out.
Not even in
But
the slightest.
but really to wrap up the episode, I know that like Kev said that we probably went a lot longer than we originally anticipated. We're just going to go over just kind of like our standout performances from this past week, whether it was in a good way or a bad way. So, Kev, there were a lot of performances from this past week, individually and from a team perspective. Just give me your winners and losers from this past week, from week 10.
I'll definitely say I'll highlight a team. Winner for me is going to be the Carolina Panthers. They have overcome the last two games, winning two close ones. Bryce Young gets his first back-to-back wins of his career. I know he didn't really beat anybody good in terms of the Saints and the Giants, but the Panthers have found a way to get it done. Chuba Hubbard has been absolutely insane on the ground since he's gotten his extension. And again, the Panthers are finding ways to get it done, albeit whether it is close games, bad teams, whatever it is. They looked very dysfunctional to start the season. They went and benched Bryce, and then he came back in, and now he has won two in a row. In terms of losers, I mean, there's a long list of people that you can classify as a loser. I'd probably just go out there and say the Dallas Cowboys, man. It's we talked about it earlier. They can't get it done. They're dysfunctional all the way from the top down. I would say that the Colts are losers, but there's a word that I want to use that I can't use on air, and it's just it's well beyond that. So I'll keep that to myself. But it's definitely going to be the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you can even throw in the New York Jets because, good lord, they go and get Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers, and they're still terrible. But I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys because of the collapse and the lack of effort that Jerry has done. You can't say that about New York. At least New York went out there and tried to make Aaron happy and getting the players he wanted and trading for players and doing what they can, but it just didn't pan out versus Dallas did nothing and expected something to change. So, yeah, Dallas is going to be my loser for the week as well.
For me, I think really the best performance is somebody that we just talked about in the previous segment, and that was Jamar Chase. I'm gonna also tie in Joe Burrow as well. I know it was in a losing effort, but the fact that Joe threw for over 400 yards, had 4 touchdowns. Jamar Chase had, like I said, 11 catches, 260 some yards, and 3 touchdowns in a losing effort. Um, as far as just like the winning performances of the week, I know it didn't result in a win, but to me, when I look at that combination of Joe and Jamar, I don't think there was a better performance from this past week. I mean, granted, we saw a lot of great performances from week 10 as a whole, but I don't think it was better than what we saw from Joe and Jamar on Thursday night. They lit it up. They were absolutely fantastic. And the only reason why they didn't win that game was simply because their defense failed them in every single way imaginable. And I understand that they had a tall order going up against Lamar Jackson, who's one of the most athletic quarterbacks that we've ever seen. It's not an easy feat trying to stop that guy. But yeah, what Joe and Jamar did on Thursday, had they won that game, that performance would be looked at as one of the greatest quarterback wide receiver performances that we've ever seen. And unfortunately, it came in a losing effort. So it's definitely a tough pill to swallow uh, if you're Joe and Jamar. And, you know, team puts up 34 points on the road. More times than not, you probably win that game. But when your defense gives up 35, that's really tough to look back at. Um, really, when it comes to the losers, like you said, there's plenty of losers to kind of go around here. I'm going to go with the Bears. The Bears have faltered over the last couple of weeks. And, you know, I look back at that Hail Mary pass against the Commanders, and I, I may look back on that individual moment as maybe the moment that broke the season for the Bears if they continue this slide. But losing to the Patriots at home, scoring 3 points, that's just abysmal. I understand that the Patriots have a pretty good defense, and the Patriots have a pretty solid rookie quarterback in Drake May, but this team is better than 3 points. And I mean, you got DeAndre Swift, you have Keenan Allen, you got Roma Dunze, you have Caleb Williams, you have plenty of targets to be able to go to. But the biggest weakness on this offense is clearly the offensive line. They just cannot protect him. And unfortunately for them, it's kind of something similar that we brought up with Cincinnati. Um, until they get that offensive line addressed, it's going to be an up and down road for them. And I mean, Caleb has definitely shown flashes of greatness in Chicago so far. But if you can't protect him, it's not going to happen. And getting sacked 9 times against New England's defense, that is going to be a tough film session. I mean, they've probably already gone over the film since we're recording on Monday. They probably had that film session today. I guarantee you that film session was not pretty, especially geared towards the offensive line. You just cannot have that. But yeah, that was probably one of the most disappointing performances that I've seen from the entire year, not just from the Bears specifically, but it's probably one of the most lackluster performances that I've seen from any NFL team this year. And granted, Kev, there were plenty of games that we saw from this past weekend where we saw teams in the single digits when it came to point totals. The Vikings were in that group, the Jets were in that group, and the Bears were in that group. But the Bears had the lowest. The Bears were at 3 points. It's unacceptable across the board. And like I said, I keep going back to that Hail Mary against the Commanders. I think we're going to look back at that point as essentially the moment that broke them this season if they continue that slide. But we'll see what happens. We'll see if they can bounce back. But those are my winners and losers from this week. Joe and Jamar with the performances that they had. That was the best individual performance that I've seen from this past weekend or this past week in general. And then I'm going to go with the Bears as like the worst performance from what I saw this past week.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for us. Again, I apologize for it going a little longer than expected.
I'm glad
Definitely
that, listen, you need to get out of your system. It's been building
yeah,
for the last couple of weeks, and at some point, the dam was going to burst.
yeah, and so it is what it is at that point. So we appreciate the support. Again, we're doing the best that we can with our available schedules, and we're making it work. We're still having fun. It may not be as consistent as it once was, and for that, we do apologize. But our lives do get a little busy over the course of a 7-day week span. So we're having fun. We're doing it. We're staying in contact. We would love to do it more, but we're making do, and we appreciate for those of you that have stuck around, and even for our newcomers, we are just going to continue to have fun with this and do what we can.
Exactly. And wherever we get the support from, we always appreciate it. And just stay in tune for the rest of the week. We'll definitely have some short content coming out for you guys. Honestly, I'm just gonna basically take that entire tirade that Kev had with the Colts, and I'm literally just gonna post that as an individual segment on YouTube because I think there's a lot of Colts fans that share that sentiment in Indy, and I wouldn't be surprised that if Kev gets some support from some of the Colts fans from that because I think it's well deserved based off of just really the trajectory of the team at this point. So, but yeah, like I said, just stay in tune. Stay tuned for the rest of the week. We'll definitely have plenty of content coming out later this week. And until next time, you guys, take it easy, and we'll see you around later.